And now gives the floor to the shadow rapporteurs. First is Jude Kirton-Darling.
Thanks very much. As has already been said, services are crucial to our economy. They're crucial to our employment and to jobs, no more so than in my own member state. And that's why their regulation and the level of standards applied in service sectors is really key to ensure a balanced economy with good quality jobs here and abroad. So I'd like to start by saying that we in the Socialist Group see the draft that's been presented as a clear signal from the rapporteur of her willingness to reach a broad and meaningful agreement with all political groups. And we'll do our very best to work in the same constructive spirit towards the shared objective. In terms of content, I'll reiterate at the beginning that we want to see a revival of multilateralism and that this is not the first best option, and therefore nothing should be in this agreement which is incompatible with a multilateral agreement in the future, and that will be a red line through our position on TiSA. I'm glad to see that the draft proposed builds on the previous compromises that we've already fought for when we were working on the TTIP resolution drafted by our chairman, particularly on issues like the respect for public services, the right to data privacy, and the prudential carve-out for financial services. These are all key, and I hope that we'll be able to make pretty swift progress around those aspects, because I think there are going to be some much more complicated discussions on other areas. It won't come as any surprise that when it comes to public services, we'll be calling for, as Ms Redding has called for, a complete carve-out from the negotiations. But also will be defending positive listing and opposing any kind of ratchet or standstill clause which would affect public services. Overall, I think the report, in order to be the most effective possible, will have to be a combination of political messages and detailed technical guidance to the Commission negotiators, and this is particularly the case when it comes to domestic regulation and mobility. We need to work on the technical aspects to ensure that the Commission has to address our concerns and can't hide behind ambiguous or general language. And we're certainly going to make some improvements in this respect. On mobility, we need to make clear that we need specific safeguards to ensure the protection of working standards and rights. And I would suggest to this end the inclusion of a binding horizontal social clause applying to Mode 4 commitments in the EU schedule, as well as language specifically on the definitions of eligible categories of workers. On domestic regulation, public authorities' right to regulate must be guaranteed effectively, and I welcome the fact that this appears clearly in the draft text. We now need to have a thorough discussion about how best we can achieve this in the negotiations, and I'll be tabling some amendments to contribute to that discussion. I think we can be far bolder in calling for the provisions around domestic regulation to not go beyond the provisions of GATS, and that comes back to my first comment about multilateralism. In conclusion, and not to take too much time, I think something has to be said about transparency, and you should always start with the positive, and we recognise that there have been steps forward with this Commission in terms of transparency, that more's being done than previously to try and build public trust around trade policies, but much more still needs to be done, and we should be unapologetic in the report. We should be calling for full, transparent and open negotiations, and that all of the offers and the texts from all TiSA participants should be in the public domain. We shouldn't bow below what we would expect in the WTO if we're negotiating an agreement which we want to end up in the WTO if it concludes in the end. I look forward to working with the rapporteur and the other shadows, and I think we'll have a really constructive report on how we want to steer the negotiators in the negotiations. The last point is we should all remember that this isn't a vote on whether we accept or we reject TiSA. That decision will only come at the end of the negotiations. This is about sending political signals to the negotiators. And if we don't send political signals to the negotiators, then we can't complain about what comes out at the end of the negotiations. Thank you very much.
Quite right. Emma McLaughlin.